Hey, Joel.
Hey, how you been? Is it Oren? Am I saying that right?
Wow.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Where are you from? That's a
Israel.
Israel. Okay, gotcha. Very nice to meet you, man. So I've got 10 minutes. I'd like to just kind of get on with it, right? Kind of try to answer your questions. You sent me a voice memo regarding a deal that you have under contract for wholesale initially, but you're trying to pivot to RBP. I call it equity protection program. It's kind of this thing that we both learned from Corey, Bull, right? Um, so can you tell me a little bit about kind of the story of where you're at right now, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, my acquisition guy did the first pitch to present the RBP and that we're going to work with an end buyer. Seller said, okay. And so now he needs to come back and tell him, well, I checked, congratulations, we can do that. And then I need to, based on my understanding, sign the addendum, the RBP addendum, right? And also the authorization to sign listing docs. And I just want to make sure that these are the two docs that I need to sign right now in order to start.
So are you needing to list it on the MLS, or you have a buyer and you don't need to
I
list
do
it?
not have a buyer.
Okay, so who walked it? The person that walked it's not buying it?
Couple investors.
A couple of investors, they looked at it, but you don't have a buyer. So that was an unsuccessful showing,
Yeah.
right? Okay. All right. So, I mean, I can tell you from experience, um, you want to have your purchase and sales agreement and the attorney, in fact, the authorization to list document sign. I always get them signed together from the start, um, from the beginning, because you will not have the authority to list the house and sign listing docs without that. You need that. And that may change per MLS, multiple listing service. What state is the property in?
Montana.
Montana. Okay. So I'm not that familiar with those rules over there. I don't know if Brokerless deals with Montana property. And then even in the same state, there's different MLSs, and the rules of the MLS is what dictates if the attorney, in fact, the authorization to list documents need to be notarized. So do you foresee any issues on the seller getting that, agreeing to notarize it or not? Not really?
No, no.
Okay. So it will really depend on the MLS. You don't have to go through that expense just yet. What we do is we send it via proof. Proof.com is a e-notary website that you can send notarization requests, but you only need it if the MLS requires it.
E-proof, you
Right?
said?
No, proof, like literally
Okay.
proof.com. You can create like a business account and you can send notarization requests.
All right. So for usually online notary is okay with most of the.
Yeah. At least for us, that's what's worked. Again, it may depend on the actual MLS, but for us and multiple MLSs that we've done this, it hasn't been an issue. E-notarization is just fine. It costs $25 typically for the first stamp, and then I think it's like $5 or $10 after the stamp. The cool thing about that, it's much cheaper than getting an in-person notary, and the seller can do it at any time from their computer.
You,
Um, Sometimes, this may not be the case in this case, but sometimes if we get seller pushback, so the way we do it is we're pitching cash offer, and we include the authorization to list documents on every contract. And when they sign, it's part of our standard process. Like, hey, we may pre-market the property. We do need to get all of the finishes, scope of work. You don't really care who buys it, really. The only thing that you care about is that you get your money by this date. And in order for us to not lowball you, we go ahead and get all of the finishes and the scope of work lined up with our end buyer so that you don't have to be money out of pocket and you don't have to get lowball. And typically that's kind of like the pitch for them to be okay. But if we do get pushback on notarization, like, why do you need to notarize, blah, blah, it's like, well, there's a lot of fraud. Naturally, we've seen that a lot in all of our files. There's a lot of fraud, and we need to know, since we're doing everything over the phone, we need to know that you're who you say you are. And so we're going to get that notarized in that page. Okay. So any questions so far?
Yes. So I only need the purchase agreement and authorization to list. I don't need the addendum for the RBP, really.
I don't use it, me personally. Like, I would get it if you want to, just to be safe. But the way that we do it and it is very simple. It's really going to come down to the title company. So you got to have a good conversation with your title company on how you work. Because one title company that I used to work at, they needed me to file the memorandum to then get paid. Other title companies, they'll be okay if you just send the invoice.
I see.
So it will, a couple of factors: the seller, the MLS where you're listing it at, and the title company. You got to make sure that you're aligned, because any of those three can change the process for you, if that makes sense. So that was what was the other question?
The realtor. Now, let's assume that's my first deal. I do Novation. I would like to find a realtor that will represent me. And let's say I found one. And do I disclose that I'm not the owner? I just have I'm an attorney. In fact, I can sign it.
Yeah, they're gonna know, because your name's not on the tax record. So,
am I going to tell them up front or wait for them to find out?
So I would always be upfront ahead of time. There's nothing to hide. The fact is that you have a binding contract with the seller, which includes that you can market and sign listing docs for the seller. Where you have to be careful, and this is where it gets sticky, is you have a responsibility. When you're signing those documents on behalf of the seller, you need to make sure that you don't screw up, that you don't put them or you in a bind. Meaning, let's say that, I'll tell you an experience that I had recently. Let's say that I had a house under contract that I promised the seller $250,000, and then I had a buyer lined up for $325,000. You with me so far? I promised them $250,000, sold it for $325,000. It turns out that the seller owes $280,000. So I've already sold the house to a buyer. They're already moving. They pay for appraisal. They pay for survey. They pay for inspection. And then I come to find out that there's a loan for more than I promised the seller. So I always recommend get the title search done, get all the loan mortgage payoffs first done, because you don't want to be promising something to another party that's going to have their own agent. Like, you have to do your work, and you have to do the work of the seller. Like in this thing, you have to do what you're supposed to, and what everybody else is supposed to do. Don't ever assume that they're doing it, because everybody screws up all the time. So
you're running title search. Sorry to interrupt. So you're running title search before you list it on the market?
Yeah. That's step one for us. Like, I've been in so many situations where a lien comes out of the blue and I've already sold out the property. Or, to me, the first step, as soon as I get a contract with a seller, I open escrow and I get a title commitment. After that, I get the loan payoffs. I request the loan payoffs because I want to know what are the liens. Because when you go and calculate your payoff, it's going to be limited by whatever equity or whatever amounts they owe.
I see.
You know?
All right. So you run title before.
Yeah. For sure.
That's
So
an important.
I open up escrow. I open up escrow and get those loan payoffs. And in terms of your question with an agent, I would definitely let them know, hey, I'm the attorney. In fact, I have the rights. Here it is. Even when we blast, whenever the way that we do it, it's a little bit more streamlined. But whenever we get the buyer agent inquiries, we get them to fill out a form that automatically sends them a buyer agent packet. And in that buyer agent packet, we have the attorney in fact document. We're telling them we're the attorney in fact, because we do this virtually 100%. So we want to let them know, like, we are the attorney in fact. Do not negotiate with the seller or we will notify the MLS board. Because I will tell you, you will find buyer agents that are drama driven, that are just, they're going to flag your listing as a wholesale listing on the MLS, and they don't like that because the MLS is supposed to be for properties, not wholesaling. So it's good that so this would be your first time kind of going through this process, I'm assuming?
Novation, yeah.
Yeah. So, for sure, there's a lot of steps, and you want to make sure that your seller's on board, that they understand that they're going to need to provide access, and you got to make sure that your contracts are in good standing, which, in the course content for Corey and them, it should be good, in terms of what they have there. I just happen to do it still the old way. I don't do it the whole receipt method, invoice method. Solely, I actually get an authority. I still sign the listing documents. The sellers don't. So I still get the authorization to list documents. But the downside of that is you have to make sure that the seller's compliant, that all the liens are accounted for, because what you don't want is a third party, a buyer, moving their family or whatever, and then find out the seller can't close because they owe too much money. Or they're, or they need more time. So it's a lot of coordinating, if that makes sense.
But the seller still needs to sign the closing documents at the end, right?
Yeah, the seller signs the closing documents, the actual closing documents that they're closing. And I'll give you even one last tip because I'm out of time here. But before closing, you have to get a draft settlement statement from the escrow company, and you want to calculate your invoice.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you want to prepare the seller before closing. This is the amount that you're going to get net to you, because they're going to see, let's say that they sold to you for 200,000 and you sold it for 250. They're going to see that 250. So they're going to be like, wait, I sold to these people for 200. Why am I signing a closing statement for 250? Then their next question is going to be, am I going to have to pay taxes on that 250 versus the 200? So before we close, I get my coordinators, which manage this type of conversation. My coordinators, they say, Mr. Seller, congratulations, we're going to be scheduled for closing. Before we can schedule you, here's the net cash to seller the day of closing. Do you approve, yes or no? And here's the breakdown. We promised you 200. You had $180,000 of a loan. So that leaves you with 20,000. Does that make sense? And I get it in email. They say, yes, approved. Because the day of closing, I don't want the deal to fall off because they thought that they sold for 200, but then we sold it for 250. And then they see like commission fees for the buyer agent, the title policy, the escrow fees. You have to account for all of that in your numbers.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So before the closing, because asked me how I know, I've had this issue. One of the key things before I tell title, you send me the draft HUD, we balance it out. Once I balance it out, we'll talk with the seller. We'll get alignment as to what the net to seller is the day of closing. We'll get approval from them in writing, because people will forget. we're dealing with squirrels. Like the sellers that we deal with, we're dealing with squirrels. So they're gonna be like, wait, what? You sold it for like 50 more? Yeah, I was like, well, yeah, but we pumped the septic tank. We paid for the pictures. We did this. We got you exactly what you needed, and you approved it. Here it is. You approved it. This is you writing that you approved it. People will get greedy the last minute.
Yeah.
So I get that in writing, like they're like, oh shit, okay, whatever. Or they'll be like, yeah, okay, cool, I get it. So you want to get that stamped, locked, and loaded.
All
Does
right.
that help?
Yeah, you mentioned there's a package that you're sending the realtor. What they want to see usually?
We call it a buyer agent packet. And in our CRM, once they opt in, it automatically sends them. It has the seller disclosure. It has that we do pay commission, because that's their first question. Do you pay commission? How much of commission do you pay for a buyer agent? That's gonna be their first question. It's gonna answer the seller disclosure, the condition, if we did an inspection. So in our process, if the house is occupied, we pay for an inspection. We get an inspection done. Even if the buyer agent and the buyer are going to end up having their own inspection, we go ahead and get an inspection done, because what we want to do is not bother the seller with a bunch of showings that are just unnecessary. So we go ahead and we get an inspection report. If they have a survey, we get a survey. If they don't have a survey, we get a survey quote. And so we put all of that information in the email. And if it's occupied, we get a Matterport, a 3D tour of the house. And we say to the agent, we're not going to schedule you a showing until your buyer has reviewed the inspection report, the disclosure, and the Matterport, and the pictures. And I've had deals that just get sold from that email, because essentially you're giving them everything that they need to make a buying decision for the most part. If it's vacant, then I don't pay for the Matterport. We just put the lockbox, we take pictures, and we don't do the inspection. That also helps us in the case that we get the inspection report back before we list. If in fact the property is in far worse condition than it is, and we need to renegotiate that, that's a good thing to have. Yeah, it costs anywhere between $300 to $500, depending on the age and the size of the house. But we do use that for renegotiation when need be. And since at that point, we already know what they owe, we know if we have room to renegotiate with them or not. Because at the end of the day, the renegotiation is rather simple. It's either you pay out of pocket and fix all this, or we renegotiate it down and get you moved. What do you want to do?
Right. Sounds good and complicated.
It's not as simple. I mean, we have everything like right now through steps, because we figured out, that to get to the closing table, there's just a lot of communication from a lot of parties. So really the first thing that we do is title due diligence. We get title, we get loan payoffs, we start getting quotes for inspections, for lock boxes, for Matterport, for pictures. We essentially get all the quotes, but we don't spend a dollar until we get clear title. We get clear title and the loan payoffs. I mean, I may deviate every once in a while if I get a good feeling, if they closed the house on a title company not too long ago, but if there's like any inheritance or any possible sign of title issues, I don't spend a dollar. And we're getting all of our contracts 90 days out.
90 days?
90 days out. Yeah, because it takes time. We rather set the right expectations. So we always start cash with a 45-day close, but typically, especially in this market, nobody wants cash because it's just too low and the market's down. So we start cash, we price anchor cash, and then we pivot to equity protection program.
And the 90 days, is it in your purchase agreement, or you added that after that?
Yeah, in the purchase agreement.
In the purchase agreement.
We say 90 days or sooner, right? Because if we can close sooner, we want them to be okay with closing sooner. So.
All right.
All
Okay.
right. I don't know if that helped or freaked you out more, but that's just really
Yeah, yeah.
how that's how it is. Really, yeah.
Yeah,
Any
I will
last
get,
minute questions?
say again.
Any other last questions before we hop off?
No, I think I will start with the authorization to sign,
Yeah.
and I will go from there. Oh, one question. Do you usually use Brokerless or find a realtor that represents you?
We use Brokerless. I mean, if they operate in there, we use Brokerless. They understand the model, so I never I've never used like a real estate agent because I think, I mean, one, it cuts into the profit. I mean, we're still paying for pictures and all that stuff. So, uh, no, and we operate in different markets. So we just don't, we operate in so different like counties that it doesn't really make sense to pay like a full 6% in our case or, for brokers when we can just do all that ourselves. So. But
Sounds
I've
good.
got, my team, I've got closers, I got coordinators. So the coordinators take care, it's a lot of paper. So the coordinators, they're the ones that push that. The closers are closing, the coordinators, they're going through all of that. But it's good for you to go through it yourself to kind of learn it.
Yeah. And the conditional mutualization, when do you sign this one?
I mean, again, you want to talk with your title company or your escrow officer. I don't use that. I've never had to use it. So I literally just get the purchase contract and the attorney in fact document, the authorization to list. And sometimes I have to get it notarized because of the MLS, sometimes I don't. But I haven't had to use that whole mutual rescission or none of that. That's, again, you got to have a conversation with Brokerless for that MLS and the title company. Make sure like here's my contracts. Here's what we do. Here's what we're looking to do. Let's hop on a call and just discuss if they're good. If they're not good, they're going to tell you. If they're good, then they're going to tell you too. That's really the only way because every title company can make up their own rules. I mean, every MLS can make up their own rules.
All right, I will get to work. I
Awesome,
appreciate
man. Good
you
luck.
a lot. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Best of luck, brother. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.